Thanos may have changed the landscape of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Mad Titan has nothing on the power of major studios, character rights, and the power of mergers. Dun dun dun! Even before the MCU was snapped out and back into existence with all the requisite sacrifices, the roster of the MCU started changing dramatically with the Mutants and Fantastic Four returning, and now it looks like Spider-Man saying goodbye once more. But outside the tricky world of rights and mergers, there's one character who carries a question mark wherever he goes, and that's Deadpool. Could the rules of the Deadpool universe keep Deadpool from the main MCU? Let's take a look. We have to admit, the very idea of talking about rules when it comes to the Merc with a mouth is almost pointless. Deadpool exists to jam a finger in the eye of the rules. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Do terms like hero or anti-hero really apply? Does it even matter? Deadpool is the meta-trickster of the Marvel Comics who plays by his own rules. On the big screen, he's been driven by two things: his love for Vanessa and a particularly big hatred for Francis. But Francis is an easy guy to hate. But his love for Vanessa and Vanessa's soft spot for lost children motivates Deadpool to look after a kid in danger, which ends up involving no shortage of time travel. It's Deadpool's time-traveling shenanigans that might keep him out of the main Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline, at least according to Reddit user Junix. Junix has pointed out that while both the X-Men franchise and the MCU have time travel playing a major factor in their storylines, they both handle time travel in different ways that make them incompatible. To understand, let's take a look at what happened in Deadpool 2. After the death of Vanessa and discovering that he can't kill himself, Deadpool decides to go ahead and give the X-Men a try, which goes bad almost immediately, landing him and the kid he sent to protect in the icebox, where he meets the hard-boiled man from the future, Cable. Cable is here to kill the young kid Collins as a kid before he can grow up to become the villain of Cable's present and our future. If that sounds familiar, well, it should. It's the basis for most time travel movies and stories that have existed. Marty McFly has to make sure his parents get together or he'll cease to exist. Terminator goes through time to kill Sarah Connor to prevent the human uprising in the future. Fry from Futurama did the nasty and the pasty to become his own grandpa. That was a weird show. Anyway, it was enough of a precedent that when Scott Lang emerged from the quantum realm and introduced the idea of time travel to the remaining Avengers, Rhodey's suggestion is to go back far enough to find a baby Thanos and, well, solve the problem before it even begins, which was as disturbing a suggestion as it was simple. The only problem being that time travel doesn't work that way, at least not in the MCU. You can't go to the past and change your future because your past becomes your future if your future you is in it. Which sounds confusing, but Nebula and Banner seem to understand it, so whatever. For Deadpool and the X-Men, however, they operate on a more traditional notion of time travel. In fact, one of the more recent X-Men movies involves sending Wolverine's future consciousness back to the past to prevent a sequence of events that leads to the Sentinels wiping out all mutants on Earth. In Deadpool 2, Deadpool is able to convince both Cable not to kill Collins and to change Collins' path so that he doesn't become the villain that destroys Cable's family. Cable's past future changes, and his children and his family live. Even more directly, Cable is able to use the last charge on his time travel disc to give Deadpool back his skee-ball token, thus saving his life. Once Deadpool gets a hold of Cable's time-traveling device, he not only saves Vanessa and X-Force member Peter's lives, he also gets rid of X-Men Origins Deadpool and prevents Ryan Reynolds from ever playing Green Lantern, thus changing the present and past and maybe future and our world, sort of. This mechanism of time travel means that Deadpool's world and the presumably more grounded time travel world of the MCU don't mesh. So does that mean that's it for Deadpool? Well, of course not. Since Disney has acquired Fox, one of the things that has spawned a lot of the promotions have featured the Merc with the mouth. It makes a great deal of sense too. Not only is Deadpool one of the most popular Marvel characters, he's also known for his fourth wall breaking tendencies as well as his meta commentary. But there's one reason to believe that Deadpool as we know him might continue. While the Mutant saga has been through a lot and perhaps is ready for the complete refresh that would go with joining the MCU, Deadpool is still going strong, and it's hard to argue that there isn't a more perfect casting for Deadpool than Ryan Reynolds. So how would the current Deadpool and his pop culture time travel mechanics work with the mechanics of the MCU? The simple answer would be that they wouldn't. Deadpool would continue to exist within his own reality. This isn't entirely different than the way Deadpool has already existed within the mutant reality. While Deadpool has made passing references to the X-Men continuum, and even some direct ones, there have been some stark differences. One of the big metal standouts is Colossus. The Colossus from the X-Men movies both looks and acts differently, and he's not the only one. One of the big standout surprises of Deadpool 2 was the appearance of Juggernaut. Juggernaut also appeared in X-Men The Last Stand, but was less well received in that movie. The Juggernaut that we got in Deadpool was much closer to the Juggernaut that we know from the comic books. All of this suggests that while Deadpool occupies a reality similar to the X-Men cinematic one, it's still not the actual X-Men timeline. This isn't that uncommon for Deadpool in the comics, as he's been known to skip around the various different realities of the Marvel continuity. Different realities are not a new thing for comic book fans either. It's a convention long-running comics have been using to tell alternate storylines or to deal with continuity issues that inevitably arise when a single character has been around for decades. The MCU actually exists in this spectrum of realities as Earth 19999, which is to say that there are a lot of room for different realities. When the Avengers went tripping through time, Bruce Banner got a lesson in different realities when he went to get the Time Stone from the Ancient One. She laid out the second part of how time travel works in the MCU. If the Time Stone is removed, it creates a new timeline, and that timeline could be without its greatest weapon to protect that reality. It's why Banner insists that the Avengers return the stones where and when they found them, which probably led to an awkward encounter with Cap at Vormir. With Loki piecing out with the Tesseract after the Battle of New York that the future Avengers visited, there are already multiple realities, and they're all going to come into play. Loki has his own series coming up on Disney Plus that will follow this alternate timeline Loki, who is yet to come to a reckoning with his brother. Doctor Strange is no stranger to multiverses as well. In fact, according to the MCU, that's how his sorcery works, by pulling and manipulating power from these alternate dimensions. So far, these alternate dimensions have been vastly different kinds of realities, but that doesn't mean that we won't be able to visit alternate timelines as well. With the second Doctor Strange movie titled The Multiverse of Madness, we're bound to see how deep into these realities he'll get. There's even a chance that he could end up in a universe where the mechanics of time travel work differently than in our reality. Doctor Strange has not been afraid to make a joke or two, but with the new movie set to be darker in theme, it's not likely to feature a cameo from the smart-mouthed Merc. But it could set up a way for Deadpool to make his way in. What does this mean for our foul-mouthed mercenary? Well, there are a few options. The first and most obvious is that he'll stay in his own reality, or at the very least a reality of his own. Only this time it would include the rest of the Marvel Universe, which would mean that we would get the same old Deadpool we've always had, but with more MCU references. Not that he shied away from the MCU references during his days at Fox. Josh Brolin played Cable in Deadpool 2 as well as Thanos in the Infinity Saga, something that Deadpool was not afraid to point out. That wasn't the only time he made passing references to the MCU. He compared his uselessness with his powers to Hawkeye and called Cable's mechanical arm a Winter Soldier arm. References have never been out of bounds for Deadpool. Appearances, however, are another thing. And now, with the wealth of characters that he'll have access to, this is not to say that Deadpool will now be riddled with mainstream MCU cameos. Even as part of the X-Men timeline, his cameos were limited to say the least. It even became part of his meta-commentary about who they could afford. Instead, the crossovers manifest in unused or underutilized characters, such as Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and of course their version of Juggernaut. The Marvel roster is pretty deep with characters that are not likely to become part of the main MCU storyline. Some of the more, shall we say, out there characters could end up being part of Deadpool's world. He could end up crossing paths with AIM, which is underutilized in Iron Man 3, or have a moment with some of the more outsized characters like the mutant organism designed only for killing known as MODOK. While Deadpool has been known to rub elbows with some of Marvel's best, his lethal nature also meant that he's had moments with some of the Marvel characters on the bottom of the barrel as well. This could be fodder for the new MCU adjacent Deadpool. This has the added benefit of allowing Deadpool to continue his R-rated ways. It's hard to tell if they'd make a distinction between Marvel Studios and a Marvel movie in the way that they did when Fox held the rights to the mutants. But by keeping Deadpool separate from the MCU proper, then they can continue to let Deadpool carry on his R-rated ways. If he was a part of the MCU proper, there would be too much pressure to temper Deadpool down to at least PG-13. Free from the MCU continuity, they could not only stay R-rated, but continue to do things that have no effect on the MCU proper. In much the same way that Negasonic Teenage Warhead or the Boy Scout version of Colossus haven't shown up in the main X-Men timeline. This ultimately makes the MCU version of Deadpool the best of all worlds. He can maintain his essential Deadpoolness while enjoying a larger playground to play in. Are the time travel rules really going to be a thing that keeps Deadpool out of the MCU? It's not really likely. Those kinds of inconsistencies are generally the sort of thing that Deadpool tends to just hang a lantern on, with an aside or a reference or a direct address to the audience. But it might be the passing excuse that he uses to keep himself separate. If nothing else, then his commitment to pop culture and the pop culture understanding of time travel. But also, if he abides by the MCU rules, that means he doesn't get to say Vanessa, and that's something he can't abide. That's how time travel might affect Deadpool's entry into the MCU. Is that enough to keep him in his own separate reality? Or has he been creating separate timelines recklessly this entire time? Let us know about what you think in the comments, and while you're at it, why not hit that subscribe button? It won't change the past, but it will change the future of your inbox. Thanks for watching.